Polyrhythms are easy. Polyrhythms are really easy, if you know how to tackle them. And the crazier and the scarier they look, the easier they actually are. You've probably wondered how pro pianists seem to play them so easily, no matter how complex they look. And that's exactly what you're going to discover in the next few minutes. And the best part, we are not going to do a single mathematical calculation or look at any beat chart, and we're definitely not gonna use any of these awkward word cues that sound ridiculous. That's all useless, and in fact is counterproductive, especially when music starts getting a bit more complex. There's a much better way to approach this. Stay with me and I promise you'll never struggle with a polyrhythm ever again. I've also written a small handbook for you with a big collection of cool exercises that are really fun to play. Every exercise is carefully explained step by step, and I've also included many cool examples from real pieces that you can have fun with while you get better. I've put a lot of hours of work into it, and I'm sure it'll come in handy many times during your whole piano journey. But I'll tell you more about that in a minute. So where's the key then? What is that miraculous way to practice them? First, let me show you why these methods like word cues or beat charts just don't work. If you watched my video on how your brain works when you play the piano, you'll already know that you can only pay attention to one single thing at a time. Only one thing. That's the main limitation of our conscious brain. So when we're practicing or when we're playing a piece, we can only pay attention to one hand, one melody, one right hand fingering, or to the sound of one crescendo if we already know the notes. The long-term memory is much more powerful than our limited attention, and it allows us to do stuff automatically, like riding a bike, washing the dishes, or play pieces we've already practiced. And we move information from our conscious attention to our long-term memory through repetition and automation. So we've discovered that we can only pay full attention to one thing at a time. Let's do a quick quiz. Imagine you're learning Fantasie-Impromptu for the first time and you get to the 4/3 polyrhythm. How would you learn it? Answer A. Try really hard to divide your attention between the two hands and try to play them at the same time. Answer B. Calculate the alignment of each note against the other hand and use that to play both hands at the same time. Answer C. Make up a word or group of words that allow you to line up both hands at the same time. Answer D. Something else. And unless your attention was focused on another specific thing when I was talking earlier, I'm sure you've chosen D. Any of the other three answers would mean that you're trying to focus on two different things at a time, and we already know that our brain can't do that. So the correct answer was something else. And this is exactly what we are going to discover together right now. So if we cannot learn polyrhythms with one single part of our brain, which is the concentration and our attention, what's the other option? That's correct, we're gonna exploit our automatized long-term memory. And now you're probably wondering, but Manu, if I've already learned both hands separately, perfectly and by heart, why it still doesn't work when I try to put them together? And your intuition is actually correct. You already did the first and most important step, which is to learn both hands like you just said, separately, perfectly and by heart. The second step, which will allow you to line everything up, is to find the anchor points and practice them. Anchor points are the notes that are played at the same time on both hands. In the case of Fantasie-Impromptu, we have one of these anchor notes once each quarter note. The other notes don't line up, but these ones are simultaneous and they'll keep your feet on the ground. So what you're gonna do now is play one hand plus the anchor notes of the other hand. Learn it in small chunks at a time, from anchor point to anchor point. And when you're tired of repeating the same small chunk over and over because you already know it by heart and you just can't get it wrong, that's the moment when we get to the third and last step, the moment of truth. And listen to what I'm gonna say because it's the most important thing of the video. It's the only thing you need to know to play any polyrhythm in the whole piano repertoire. The third and last step is to put everything together and make an effort to ignore all notes that are not anchor notes. Yes, you heard that right. You need to try not to pay attention to any note that doesn't line up. Your attention will focus only on the anchor points, and for everything that happens in the middle, you'll just trust your long-term automatic memory. And believe me, it will work. So let's come back to our Fantasie-Impromptu. Let's leave the first beat out for a second because it has a small rest. Let's look at the second beat. We've discovered that our anchor points are these notes and these notes. If you did step 2 correctly, you'll have practiced this and this until it's perfectly ingrained in your memory. So now focus only on your anchor points, trust your fingers because you've already practiced on step 1, don't overthink it and just do it! And suddenly your fingers know exactly what to do and how to line up the notes, and you never had to do any calculations or chord charts or weird things like that. It's just magic. That's the magic of our long-term memory. Now, in the case of the first beat, there's a small rest on the right hand. That's not a problem. We can use anchor points on notes and on rests. So this is how you'd practice it. And listen to this, if you want to play your polyrhythms not only correctly, but also beautifully and with a natural sound, this is the only way to go. When I teach, I always know when my students are counting or trying to align notes from both hands against each other, because it sounds clunky, like this. But when I ask them to switch the mindset and use the ignoring method instead, then it starts to sound a bit more like this. The sound quality is objectively way better. And I will show you how I've tackled myself some of the most complex polyrhythms in the piano repertoire, which appears in pieces that I've played in many recitals. Remember when I told you that the crazier and scarier polyrhythms look, the easier they actually are? And there's a reason for that. Can you guess why? And the answer is simple, because there are just more notes that you can just ignore. Let me show you a couple of examples that look crazy, but are actually quite manageable. In this famous Chopin etude, everything lines up quite well, until you get to the middle part. That's where the polyrhythm party begins. So following our method, we'll learn both hands separately, chunk by chunk, perfectly and by heart. Then we'll find the anchor notes, and then we'll just trust our muscle memory for whatever happens between anchor points. And now your attention is free to focus on voicing and phrasing and singing, and the 4 versus 6 and 5 versus 6 moments won't be an issue for you anymore. And now I'll show you the craziest polyrhythmic section I've ever encountered in a piece I've learned. This is the culmination of Ondine by Ravel. Look. I hope the idea of counting or lining up notes manually didn't even cross your mind when you saw this. The only way to learn this section is using our ignoring method. There's really no other way to tackle this. And again, it looks crazy hard, and it is definitely hard, but for other reasons and not because of the polyrhythms. We have plenty of notes we can just ignore from one anchor note to the next. Let's use the first chunk as an example. Cool, now chunk 1 is done and we're ready for the next one. So in short, polyrhythms are like love relationships. They only work if both parts have freedom to be true to themselves, both parts trust each other without trying to adapt to the other one, but at the same time, both parts are perfectly aligned on the important bits. And you need a lot of patience to work on them too. And again, if you want to master polyrhythms while having a lot of fun with them, go get a copy of the handbook I prepared for you. You'll get a lot of cool exercises with detailed explanations and some real-life examples of passages to put everything into practice. You'll be amazed of what your brain and your fingers can do without paying close attention to them. And speaking of brains, if you want to learn more about how your brain works when you play the piano, when you practice pieces on your own, or when you play in front of people, have a look at this video. You're gonna understand so much about what's going on inside your head. Don't forget to subscribe on your way out, and see you in the next video.